Welcome back to another explainer. Today we are tearing into an absolute classic piece of animated television. But, we're not just going to sit here and do a simple scene-by-scene recap. No way. We are actually going to reframe this iconic cartoon moment as an epic, deeply comedic, and frankly, kind of tragic hero's journey. It's a story of total failure, actual physical agony, and ultimately the completely chaotic lengths a father will go to for his son. Okay, let's dive right into this, because this right here is the fundamental question at the very core of our explainer today. What would you physically endure to win back the admiration of your child? Keep this emotional hook in the back of your mind as we go, because it sets the absolute highest stakes for the complete and utter absurdity that's about to follow. So, phase one of our journey, failure and the loss of respect. Just like any classic myth, right? Every epic journey has to begin with a profound, identity-shattering loss. And for our hero, Homer, that loss happens on a random suburban sidewalk. Bart is happily riding his bike, really showing off. He even drops his pants to mock the kids riding behind him. But suddenly, total disaster strikes. The bike just completely dismantles mid-ride. First, the frame snaps, leaving him balancing on just the back wheel. And then, you guessed it, that wheel disintegrates too. Bart ends up eating dirt, entirely humiliated, and immediately becomes the target of all the neighborhood kids' jokes. Now that's totally crushing for a kid. But here's the twist. His anger falls entirely on his father, who was the one who actually assembled the bike. Bart's public humiliation instantly morphs into a crushing blow to Homer's pride as a dad. So back at home, the tension is just thick. The television happens to be broadcasting a father-son robot combat tournament. Homer, desperately trying to redeem himself, suggests they enter together. It's a peace offering. But Bart, still stinging from that awful bike incident, completely dismisses his father's mechanical skills. He basically tells him, no way. And this exact moment of rejection, this acts as our hero's official call to action. Homer is pushed over the edge. He sets out on a heroic, albeit completely misguided quest to build a multifunctional robot. Which brings us nicely to our next chapter, Homer's disastrous invention. And this brilliantly illustrates the tragic, hilarious failure of the hero's initial attempt to answer that call. Just look at this disastrous inventing process. Step 1, he confidently grabs a blowtorch, only to literally immediately catch his own welding mask on fire. Classic Homer. Step 2, after a bunch of grinding and assembling, a vaguely robot-shaped artifact actually stands before him. He presses a button, and the robot's head instantly falls backward, and the entire thing just crumbles into a sad pile of junk. Step 3, feeling totally defeated, Homer grabs a hammer in absolute blind rage and just starts violently smashing the pieces to dust. It is a spectacular failure, truly. But then, amidst all the rubble and the rage, a memory surfaces, an old piece of wisdom that shifts the entire trajectory of our story. If you can't build a robot, be a robot. It's a profound, paradigm-shifting revelation. It is also, objectively speaking, a completely absurd and terrible idea, yet it becomes his guiding light. Moving right along to the next phase, the fake robot deception. Now, what's really interesting about this is that we leave traditional mechanics behind entirely and enter the realm of pure dramatic irony. The massive gap in perspective here is just incredible. The next morning, Bart wakes up startled to find this massive, intimidating robot in his room. He hits a button on the remote, and the robot starts spinning, swinging a giant hammer. Bart is so hyped, he places a six-pack of beer right in front of it, and the robot just smashes it into oblivion in one single epic blow. Bart is in total awe. He genuinely thinks he has an invincible, fearless machine. But the reality? Oh man, as soon as Bart leaves to go tell his friend Milhouse, Homer literally crawls out from a hatch in the side of the metal suit. He looks sadly at the crushed cans, drops to his hands and knees, and starts lapping up the spilled beer off the floor. The contrast between Bart's childhood wonder and Homer's pathetic, desperate reality is incredibly funny, but honestly, also oddly touching. So the day of the big competition finally arrives. Homer, of course, has to isolate himself to maintain the whole illusion. The robot silently hands Bart a handwritten note from Homer, claiming an emergency came up and he can't make it. Bart is slightly disappointed not to have his dad there cheering him on, but he shakes it off. And then, in this perfectly innocent moment of childhood creativity, Bart places a Native American feather headdress right on the robot's head. It's such a sweet little gesture, but it instantly adds this great layer of visual comedy to the extreme metallic violence that is about to unfold.
All right, ring the bell. We have entered the trials in the arena.
This is the classic trials by combat phase, and the tournament arc escalates perfectly. In round one, they face off against a small, remote-controlled car equipped with a very lethal-looking circular saw. Round two puts them up against a massive, ruthless boxing robot. And the grand final? A father-son team of literal, actual scientists equipped with advanced weaponry. The stakes are getting exponentially higher with every single round.
Let's actually look a bit closer that first round, because this is where things get real. Following Bart's command via the remote, Homer goes in for the attack, but the opponent's circular saw slices directly into Homer's arm, through the metal suit. He screams in very real, very agonizing pain, and drops his hammer. This is exactly where the cartoon absurdity clashes violently with a really grim reality. This isn't just a machine getting dented. This is a human, a father, enduring severe, bleeding physical injury simply so he doesn't let his son down again.
So Bart is desperate at this point, thinking his robot is breaking down. The saw comes down for a second strike, but Homer absolutely refuses to surrender. Fueled entirely by parental love and sheer desperation, he pulls off this epic feat of dad strength. He physically grabs the mechanical arm holding that deadly saw, uses brute force to bend it completely backward, and forces the saw to crash right back into its own car, splitting the thing completely in two. He then triumphantly waves the sparking saw in the air. It's a massive victory.
Let's move forward and see how this builds the dramatic irony even further. Backstage during a break, Bart is ecstatic. He throws his arms around his invincible, victorious robot. But inside that heavy suit, Homer is covered in wounds. He's bleeding. He can barely even withstand the physical pressure of his own son's hug. It's wild to think about. The very love and affection Homer is fighting so hard to win back is currently causing him unimaginable physical agony.
All right, slow down, take a breath. We have reached it, the great final reveal. We are now entering the emotional climax of our explainer, the final battle. The announcer calls the finalists to the stage, and Homer is staring down literally impossible odds here. His opponents are a team of highly trained scientists, and their robot is a heavily armed, incredibly powerful machine. In fact, just to demonstrate its power, it fires a warm-up shot that blasts a literal smoking hole right into the audience seating. Homer is just a battered, exhausted man in a tin suit facing actual lethal machinery. As the brutal match begins, Homer starts taking incredibly heavy damage. From the audience, someone hears the impact of a blow and mutters, "Hey, that groan sounded almost human." The announcer quickly dismisses it over the loudspeaker, but the seed is planted. The illusion is finally starting to crack under the intense pressure. The first round ends. There are exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock. Bart, playing the role of the diligent pit mechanic, decides to open the back panel of his robot to check the wiring. And what does he discover in there? Not gears, not a burnt-out motherboard. He discovers Homer's backside. Yep, the jig is up. The entire deception is exposed in literally the most compromising, awkward way possible. Homer slowly crawls out of the battered suit. He is just completely eaten up with guilt. He fully expects Bart to be furious at the lie, furious at the fake robot. He immediately begins to apologize. But the reaction is the exact opposite. Bart isn't angry at all. He is deeply, profoundly moved. It suddenly clicks for him that his dad stepped into an arena of literal death traps and allowed himself to be sliced and beaten, all just to see his son smile. Homer thought he failed by getting caught, but the sacrifice itself is what finally, truly won Bart's respect back. So the crucial point is how this actually resolves the whole external tournament conflict. Round 2 begins, and the massive killer robot charges right at the newly exposed Homer. But wait, it suddenly stops dead in its tracks. Why? Because as a highly advanced piece of technology, it is strictly programmed with the fundamental laws of robotics. It cannot, under any circumstances, harm a human being. Homer's fragile humanity, the exact thing he spent the entire episode trying to hide inside a metal shell, is ultimately the exact thing that saves his life. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought as we wrap up today's explainer. When it comes to raising a child, is it better to be an honest failure or a successful lie born entirely out of love? Homer Simpson might not be an inventor, and he certainly isn't a robot, but his chaotic, painful, and beautiful sacrifice proves that sometimes the greatest heroes are just desperate dads covered in tinfoil. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.